Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. It was only once. That's what she said, her voice so quiet I almost believed it was some memory echoing in my head. But I knew better. I'd known for weeks. Maybe longer. Sometimes I sit in the silence of our living room. After the lights go out, after she pretends to fall asleep, and I can hear every single shift in the house, every drip of the faucet, the hum of the fridge, my heartbeat in my ears. In that suffocating quiet, I remember everything. The summer heat pressing against the car windows, the reflection of her laugh, Jake's hand sliding toward her on the dash. The squeak of my passenger seat when it bore someone else's weight. It started so small, I thought I was imagining it. A casual comment of Jake's at a cookout, a subtle glance from Becky at the dinner table. We'd been married 11 years, long enough that we'd learned to predict each other's sighs and half-smiles. But I'd never predicted that. Never saw it coming, except maybe in the corners of my mind when I'd wake at 2 in the morning. Sure, I'd heard footsteps. Sure, I was missing something big. I'd stare at Becky asleep beside me, the lines of her face relaxed, her hair across the pillow, and I'd think, we're okay, right? I guess every man wonders, at some point in marriage, if his wife still loves him the same way. Maybe we all feel that creeping question of whether we're enough. That question stuck to my ribs like an old bruise, flaring up whenever Jake would show up. But I forced it aside. Becky and I had built a life here in Dallas. A mortgage, quiet suburban evenings, an understanding that Sundays were for fishing with Jake and Tuesdays were for date night at that old diner we both liked. It was routine. And routine can hide a lot of cracks if you're too proud or too scared to look closer. Jake was an old friend, somebody I'd known since we were fresh out of high school. We'd reconnected a few years after I moved here. He was a talented freelance chef, always on the go, always full of stories. Lately, those stories centered around me, or so I'd thought. Adventures in the city, new restaurant openings, a new recipe he was experimenting with. But maybe behind the stories, behind the easy grin and the open gestures, there was a secret language he and Becky had begun to share. I just didn't speak it yet. I discovered the truth one Sunday morning. I told Becky I was going fishing, like usual, with Jake. She just nodded, hardly lifting her eyes from her phone. I remembered how she used to ask me to send pictures of what I caught, or tell me to bring back some fish she could grill for dinner. This time, there was no mention of that. Just a half-hearted, have fun. I left. But I never actually made it to the lake. Call it intuition or dumb luck, but I decided to circle back. Something felt off. So I parked down the street from the house, behind a row of oaks, and waited. The morning dragged on, and the Texas heat started building. Sweat rolled down my neck, and my truck's AC was rattling. I was on the verge of leaving, feeling half foolish. Then, around noon, I saw Jake's car. He pulled into my driveway like it was the most natural thing in the world. Brazen, not even trying to hide. I watched him text someone. Moments later, Becky stepped out and waved him in. You ever get that sensation, like ice cracking under your feet, and you can't decide if you should run or freeze? My heart hammered in my ears. I sat there, half wanting to burst inside, half paralyzed. I wish I could say I was too noble to barge in on them. The truth is, I was terrified of what I'd see, of the final blow that would end the dream I thought we had. I didn't move. I let them stay. After an hour, they came back out, giggling, flirting. They walked right into my car, my other vehicle, a sedan Becky usually drove. They climbed in the passenger side. She slid into the seat first. Then Jake followed. He leaned over. I turned away, just for a second. Just enough to let the wave of nausea pass. When I looked again, I caught sight of his hand on her thigh. Her eyes were closed. The heat outside pressed in, and I felt like the air was sucked from my lungs. I left after that. Part of me wanted to knock on the window, to yank him out by his collar. But I drove off, nearly blind from the tears that wanted to come. It was Becky's betrayal, but also Jake's, someone I considered a friend. At that moment, I felt like I was watching my life from a distance, like it was some old movie, and I was powerless to stop the scene unfolding. That night, I said nothing. I tried to act normal. Becky didn't comment on my early return. She must have thought I'd stayed at the lake all day, oblivious. She was quiet, too quiet. We went through the motions of dinner, clearing plates, turning on the TV. I could smell her shampoo, see her lips parted as though she wanted to speak but thought better of it. My eyes drifted to the ring on her left hand, and I wondered if she even felt it there anymore, or if it was just some piece of jewelry that had lost its meaning. A week passed. Then, too, I pretended everything was fine. I'd say, "Going fishing, Beck," on Sunday mornings, and she'd nod. Sometimes she'd feign a polite question about how many catfish we caught. She never seemed too interested in my answers. In the meantime, I found out something else. My dashcam in the sedan was set to automatically record whenever the engine started. I'd recently forgotten to switch it off. One day, cleaning out the memory card, I discovered videos. Some of them I couldn't watch all the way through. But in those flickering images, I saw Becky and Jake in a slow, shameless dance. His hand on her bare thigh, her hair falling across the seat, her head tilting back. Quiet moans that seeped through the car's speakers like a poison. It wasn't screaming or obvious thrashing. It was slow, hungry, the tension building as she grabbed his belt buckle, and he slid closer. The lens caught their reflection in the windshield. I felt my guts twist with each second, but I forced myself to watch. To remember, because maybe, in a twisted way, that was my penance, knowing exactly how far they'd gone. Night after night, I returned to that footage in my mind. I barely ate. I didn't sleep well. Becky sensed a distance, but she chalked it up to stress from work or the summer heat. She tried once or twice to ask, "Are you okay?" I'd respond with a short nod, because if I opened my mouth, I feared the torrent that might come out. Still, I wasn't ready to confront her. I felt something darker stirring in me, a quiet rage that wanted to see how far they'd take it. My father used to say, "Sometimes, letting people think you don't know is the best way to find out who they are." So I waited, I watched, and each day, the knot in my chest tightened. Meanwhile, Jake would come around with that casual, friendly grin. He'd clap me on the shoulder, offer to help fix something in the garage, talk about a new catering gig he landed. I'd nod along, a stone in my throat. Once, we even grilled steaks together, just the three of us. He joked, "You got the best marinade in town, Dan." Becky laughed too loud. I noticed her cheeks flush, and her hand trembled when she set her glass of iced tea down. Jake spotted it, flicked his gaze at her, then at me, and I swear I caught the faintest flicker of unease in his eyes. He was good at covering it, though, and quickly changed the subject. Days bled into each other in that suffocating hush. Nights were worst. Lying in bed, Becky's silhouette near me, the soft smell of her shampoo on the pillow, and all I could see behind my closed lids was her body arching in the passenger seat, the seat belt half limp at her side. I'd fight the urge to thrash, to scream, to ask her how she could, but the silence pressed down, choking me. I thought of walking away right then, but some part of me wanted them both to face it, to feel the weight of what they'd done. Because the worst thing about betrayal, I was learning, wasn't just the act. It was the coldness that follows, the indifference in a lover's eyes when they think you're no longer worth the truth. I bided my time. I kept fishing with Jake. Ironically, on the actual lake, under the beating sun, I found some measure of focus in casting a line and letting the water ripple. Jake would chat about nonsense, or sometimes remain silent. He probably thought he was safe. Maybe he believed I was too naive or too trusting to suspect anything. I'd keep my voice steady, my eyes on the horizon, telling him I was grateful for his company. The tension simmered under every breath. I think he half wondered if I knew. But as long as I didn't show my cards, he told himself it was fine. One evening, I finally snapped. not openly, but inside. Becky and I were in the living room. She was reading a magazine. I tried to watch TV. The hush in the room felt heavy. Out of nowhere, she said quietly, "We need to talk." My heart lurched, but I managed to calm. About what? She hesitated. I could see her grip tighten on the glossy pages. "Us," she said. "How long has it been since we really talked?" I flicked off the TV. "I'm here," I told her. "Talk." She opened her mouth, then shut it, as if measuring her words. It was only once. She finally whispered, her eyes on the floor. But I knew that was a lie. She must have wanted to test if I'd break. She was offering me a crumb, as though that would lessen the blow. Maybe in her mind, if I believed it was just a one-time slip, I'd be more forgiving. I repeated her words slowly. "It was only once." She nodded, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. But they didn't fall. A part of me admired that she was at least acknowledging something. Another part of me roared inside my head, "Don't you dare lie to me." I said nothing else. Just repeated, "Only once." She didn't elaborate. She waited for me to ask. But I didn't. Silence stretched on. Eventually, she sighed and left the room. And I sat there, listening to the faint tick of the clock, feeling like I was going to explode. Days later, an opportunity fell into my lap. Becky said we should have Jake over for dinner, like old times. She wanted to show me everything was fine. I guess that the three of us could share a meal, a laugh, the illusion of normalcy. Maybe she thought I was still in the dark, or maybe she wanted to test how strong my denial was. I agreed. I bought ribeyes, the best cut from the local butcher. I prepared them with my usual marinade, set them on the grill, let the aroma fill the backyard. Jake arrived with a grin, though it looked a shade too wide. Becky hovered with plates, condiments, forced chatter. I was as polite as I knew how to be. We ate under the dim porch light, the summer air thick around us. Becky kept sipping from her beer bottle, her knuckles pale as she gripped it. Halfway through dinner, a hush fell. Jake cleared his throat, tried to talk about some new catering gig out of state. I said, "Jake, pass me a napkin, would you?" And he flinched like I'd snapped a whip. He reached across the table, his hand unsteady. Becky looked between us like she was waiting for a blow. "This marinade's perfect," Jake managed, swallowing. I nodded, my jaw so tight it ached. "Thanks," I replied, and I waited for him to sweat. After dinner, I collected the plates. Becky said, "I'll help," but I held up a hand. "No, you two sit." I went inside, breathing in the half-cool air of the kitchen, trying to calm my pulse. Through the window, I saw them, heads bent together, whispering. Jake's expression flickered with panic. Becky's eyes brimmed with something. Fear, regret, maybe defiance. My chest constricted. I felt like the ground was shifting under me. "Steady," I told myself. "Let them sweat." Then I returned, carrying the keys to our sit-in. I twirled them once around my finger, casual as I could manage. I caught Jake's eye. "Mind parking it for me?" I said, as though I'd just recalled an errand. "You know the spot." For a heartbeat, he stared. Then color drained from his face. Becky's hand flew to her mouth. She knew exactly what I'd implied. He stood, stammered something, took the keys. He walked out front with rigid steps, like a man walking the plank. Becky stayed behind, her eyes wide, the truth catching up to her at last. When Jake came back, dinner ended soon after. He made some flimsy excuse and left, probably fumbling to compose himself the moment he got in his own car. Becky and I stood in the aftermath. The night sky pressing down, the patio chairs askew like we'd been caught in a storm. She looked at me, tears threatening again. "Dan," she whispered. What was that?" My jaw tightened. "He knows now," I said quietly, "that I've seen it all." The dashcam, Becky, every second. Her face went slack, as if a mask fell away. "Oh God," she said, voice trembling. I didn't respond. I walked past her to the bedroom. She followed, but I shut the door. I pressed my palms against it, forehead resting on the wood, trying to steady my breathing, trying not to break down. I heard her on the other side, whispering, "Dan, please. Dan." I squeezed my eyes shut. Images swirled in my head. Her body in that seat, his lips on hers, the soft moans echoing. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. Finally, I opened the door. She stood there, tears on her cheeks. I tried to speak, but it came out in a ragged hush. "Don't," I said. "Don't try to make it sound better than it is." She nodded, as if she understood that words were worthless. Then, in a voice so fragile I barely recognized it, she asked, "Do you hate me?" Something inside me twisted. "No," I whispered. "I don't hate you." And that was the simple, awful truth. I still loved her, or at least the woman I thought she was, but love was overshadowed by a raw, strangling pain. We existed in that limbo for a couple more days. She slept in the bedroom. I took to the couch. Our house was so quiet, so unbearably still that it felt like one long night of the soul. Becky tried once to come in and talk, her voice gentle. "Dan, I need." I shook my head. "You should have needed me before," I said. "Not after." And she backed away, hugging herself, tears welling again. On the third day, I realized I had to end it. Not just for me, but for her too. This suffocating hush was killing us both, turning our home into a mausoleum for something that had died the moment she opened herself to Jake. As evening approached, I walked into the bedroom. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, hands clasped. I could see from the lines on her face she'd been crying, or maybe just not sleeping. I crouched down, took a breath. "Tonight," I murmured, "I'm going to tell you how I felt every time I saw that footage. Every time you looked at me after." Her chin quivered. "Dan, I'm so sorry," she began. I shook my head, holding up a hand. "Don't speak yet. Let me finish." My voice trembled as I told her how I'd seen the dashcam recordings, how I'd watched them on loop to the point I couldn't sleep, how each second felt like a blade dragging across my skin. I described how it felt to come home and see her gaze skitter away from mine, how I dreaded Sunday mornings because that was their time, apparently, and not mine anymore. I told her how I loved her once, loved her enough to trust her completely, but that trust was gone. I told her I tried to bury my pain, to spare her, because I still wanted to believe in the life we built, but that illusions can only last so long. She sobbed quietly, tears slipping down her cheeks, but I could see in her eyes a flicker of despair. Maybe it was the first time she was truly feeling the weight of what she'd done. "What happens now?" she asked in a broken voice. I took a breath, the ache in my chest almost unbearable. "Now," I said, "I walk." And I meant it, because some betrayals can't be patched over with apologies. Some goodbyes don't need drama. They just need truth. And the truth was, I would never be the same after this. She tried to reach for me, but I stood up. I felt a bitterness in my mouth, almost physical. "I'm not going to yell," I told her, my voice raw. "I won't scream or throw things. I won't beg you to fix what's broken." I looked around at the room we'd shared for years. Memories of Sunday mornings, her laughter, late-night confessions, all swirling like ghosts in the half-light. "This is the end," I said, blinking back tears of my own. "I deserve more than your pity, and I won't stay in this silence that's killing us both." She trembled, tears dripping onto her lap, but she didn't argue. She knew. Maybe in some corner of her heart, she'd always known this day would come if I found out. Her affair with Jake was a choice she made over and over. Saying it was only once was just her attempt to soften the blow. But I'd seen enough to know it was more. Even if it had been once, the betrayal was the same. I packed a bag. The entire time, she sat on the bed, hugging her knees, silent tears falling, not stopping me. My hands shook as I shoved clothes into a duffel. Photographs stared back at me from the walls. Our wedding picture, her bright-eyed smile, my old grin of naive happiness. The ring on my left hand felt heavy, like an anchor. I considered ripping it off right then, but I kept it on for the moment. Maybe I just needed to hold on to the last vestige of what once was, if only to remind myself that love can turn to ashes if you let it go cold. When I finished packing, I turned off the bedroom light and walked down the hall. She followed me to the door, barefoot, her arms wrapped around herself. I paused, opened my mouth to say something, but the words died on my tongue. Instead, I opened the door. The humid Texas evening air rushed in. Cicadas hummed in the distance. She whispered my name. I looked back, feeling the sting behind my eyes. "I loved you," I said, and then I stepped outside. The door closed softly behind me. I climbed into my truck, started the engine, and pulled away from the driveway. A single lamp lit the front porch, casting a pale glow on Becky's figure as she stood in the open doorway. She didn't call out. She just watched me go. Maybe she knew nothing she said could keep me there. Maybe she finally understood that my silence had been the real storm all along. I drove aimlessly for a while, the city lights blurring around me, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles hurt. I remembered the first time I'd brought Becky to that diner years ago, how she smiled at me over a plate of chicken fried steak. I remembered the morning we got the call that her father was in the hospital, how I held her while she cried with worry. I remembered fishing with Jake, back when we were young and dumb, telling jokes that made us double over with laughter. All those memories weighed on me like lead. Eventually, I checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. The fluorescent sign buzzed, the parking lot mostly empty. My room was silent and smelled of stale carpet. I set my bag down and sank onto the bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper. That sense of unreality came back, like I'd stepped out of my life entirely. Hours passed in a haze. The next morning, I woke to a dull ache in my chest. The kind of ache that reminds you it wasn't a dream. I spent the next few days in a fog, going to work as usual but sleeping at the motel. My coworkers didn't ask questions, or if they did, I brushed them off. Becky called a few times. I let it ring. She left voicemails, quiet, tearful messages. I didn't listen more than a few seconds. I told myself I needed space, time to breathe. But in the darkest hours, I still felt a pang of longing, I suppose. Love doesn't evaporate overnight. It clings. It begs to be seen. Despite the betrayal, the hurt, the anger, part of me missed the familiarity of home. The sound of Becky humming in the kitchen, the softness of her presence. On the 5th day, Jake called. My phone buzzed with his name. I stared at the screen, a storm of fury building in my gut. But I answered, maybe because I needed to hear what he had to say. "Dan," he started, voice trembling. I'm sorry. I never meant to." I let out a short bark of laughter. "Don't say you never meant to, Jake," I told him, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "You meant it every time you touched her. Every time you climbed into my passenger seat." He let out a shaky breath. It got out of hand. I didn't think. I cut him off. "You didn't think I'd find out, you mean? Or you didn't care?" Silence from his end. I stared at the motel's chipped nightstand, at the half-empty styrofoam cup of coffee. Then I said, "You knew how I felt about her. You knew my life. And you thought you could have it all without consequences." Another pause. Then softly, "Dan, I'm sorry." He repeated it like an echo, like the words were worthless even to him. I hung up, my hand trembling. I realized then that no matter how sorry Jake claimed to be, it didn't matter. Trust is like glass. Once shattered, you can't just piece it back and pretend it's whole. I didn't want revenge in the sense of hurting him physically. I wanted him to live with the knowledge that he'd destroyed something, that there was no clean escape. I wanted him to see Becky's tear-stained face in his mind at night, to wonder if it was worth it. That evening I drove to our old house. My house, though it no longer felt like home. I parked out front. Becky's car was there, along with Jake's. My heart thundered. A part of me wanted to floor it and just drive away forever, but I forced myself out. The air was thick with humidity and tension. I knocked on the door. Becky answered, her eyes puffy, her hair pulled back in a loose bun. She looked exhausted. Over her shoulder, I saw Jake in the hallway, arms folded, face pale. I felt the anger swirl inside me. But I kept my voice steady as I said, "We need to talk, the three of us." Becky looked ready to protest, but she stepped aside. Jake cleared his throat and nodded once. We moved into the living room. The silence made every tick of the old clock on the mantel loom louder. I stayed standing. Becky sat, twisting her hands in her lap. Jake hovered behind the couch, like he wanted a quick escape. "All right," I began softly. "Here's the truth. I'm done. Becky, I'm filing for divorce. Jake, you can have her, if that's what you both want. But don't expect me to act like this never happened." Becky started to sob, tears streaking her cheeks. Jake tried to speak, but I held up a hand. "No, I'm talking now. I'm not coming back to this marriage. Becky, I hope you find whatever it is you were missing with me. I really do. But understand, I loved you. And you threw that away." Becky cried harder. I don't want him." She got out between sobs, flicking a glance at Jake. I was confused, lonely. "I don't want to lose you, Dan." A tremor ran through me. "Well, you did," I said quietly. I turned to Jake, who watched me with eyes full of regret or fear, maybe both. "Jake, you and I have years of history. But that's over now, too. If you see me on the street, don't bother waving. You made your bed." He pressed his lips together. "I know what," he said, voice hoarse. "But I never wanted." "Stop it," I cut him off. "Don't lie to my face." A beat of silence. Then I exhaled slowly. "I came here to tell you both, face to face, that I'm not going to do anything dramatic. I'm not beating you up, Jake. I'm not burning the house down. I'm not flinging accusations in front of the neighbors. But I'm leaving, and I'm not coming back." Becky closed her eyes, tears leaking through. Jake looked at the floor. My heart felt like it was about to burst out of my chest, the pain so intense I could hardly breathe. But I walked to the door. Before I left, I turned, letting my eyes wander over the living room, where we'd once shared so many good memories. Movie nights, holiday gatherings, quiet evenings reading. "This used to be my home," I murmured. "Now it's just walls." I stepped out onto the porch, the slam of the door behind me echoing like a final heartbeat. Night had fallen. Cicadas droned. The summer sky stretched endless overhead. I stood there for a moment, bag in hand, the weight of my decision settling like lead in my chest. But with it came a strange sense of relief, like I'd finally torn off a bandage that had been stuck too long, the wound suffocating beneath. I drove away, not looking back. I had nowhere certain to go, but anywhere felt better than that silent prison. At a red light, I caught sight of my reflection in the rearview mirror, eyes bloodshot, jaw clenched. The ring on my finger caught the glow of the traffic signal. I slid it off, placing it on the passenger seat. I felt my throat tighten. Even if I still loved Becky in some corner of my heart, even if 1,000 regrets haunted me, I refused to live the rest of my days in that quiet agony. In the weeks that followed, I moved into a small furnished apartment near my job. It wasn't much, just a living room and a cramped bedroom. But it was mine, free of secrets and ghosts. I spent my evenings picking at old takeout in front of the TV or fishing alone by the lake, letting the hours pass in the hush of nature. Jake never called again. Becky tried a few times, left messages about how she wanted to talk, how she was sorry, how maybe we could try counseling. But I knew it was too late. Maybe she truly realized her mistake. Maybe not. Either way, the moment I saw that dashcam footage, our marriage had ended. The rest was just an echo. My divorce papers are in process now. It'll take some time, but I'm ready. I've told my parents. Mom cried. Dad shook his head in disbelief. My sister texted me, outraged on my behalf. But I appreciate their support. I know I'll survive this. The hurt lingers. Some nights, I still feel that dull ache, that old love that doesn't vanish overnight. But I also feel a stirring of something else, acceptance, maybe even hope. That I can rebuild a life that's honest, one day at a time. Late yesterday, I was sitting by the lake, fishing rod steady, the water reflecting the sunset's orange glow. A memory washed over me of Becky and me in the early days, laughing over spilt coffee in a rundown cafe, imagining a future that felt so certain back then. I closed my eyes, let the sorrow come. Then I exhaled, opened my eyes, and cast the line again. There's a kind of slow healing in letting go, a quiet acceptance that not every love is meant to last forever, and that sometimes the worst betrayal is not that it happened, but how easily the other person can look at you with indifference afterward, like you no longer matter. I'm not sure what tomorrow holds. Maybe I'll find someone new, or maybe I'll spend a long while alone, rediscovering who I am without her. But I know one thing for sure. I can't keep living in that silent pain, that stifled hush where you can't even breathe without wondering if the person next to you is lying to your face. I'd rather face the heartbreak head-on, teeth gritted, than bury it and let it fester. So this is my confession, I suppose. My story of finding out that even the most trusted friend and the woman you vowed to love can shatter your world in a single choice, or in many choices, repeated in the hush of your own car. I won't pretend the road ahead is easy. The lonely nights, the second-guessing, the regrets that surface when I see an old photograph, those will still come. But I'll face them with honesty, because I've learned that silence can be a slow poison. And I won't let that poison kill me any longer. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still see her face, that moment she looked at me from the bed, tears running down her cheeks, wanting me to stay, offering too little, too late. I feel sadness, an ache so profound it leaves me breathless. But I also feel a spark of self-respect, of clarity that I've made the choice to stand up for myself, to walk away without screaming or smashing dishes, to quietly declare that my love was worth something, that I was worth something. Even if she forgot it, I never will. I can almost smell that final dinner now, the steaks sizzling on the grill, Jake's forced laughter filling the night air, Becky's trembling hands. That was the turning point, the silent battle between what I knew and what they thought I didn't. And handing Jake those keys, that was the moment he realized I'd seen it all from day one. The tension in his eyes was all the confirmation I needed. So, if you ask me how this ends, it ends here. Not with fists or curses or a big scene on the front lawn, but with a man stepping away, carrying what's left of his dignity in a duffel bag. With an empty ring resting on the passenger seat, a heavy ache in his chest, and a strange sense of finality. My father once said the measure of a man is how he handles what breaks his heart. And maybe this is me handling it in the only way I know how, quietly, with truth, and without a single backward glance. That's all there is to tell. The rest is just the slow process of forgetting how it felt when she was mine, and remembering how to breathe on my own again.